All right, Lee, we're going to jump into the world of sponsors today, like how to deal and overcome bad ones, how to leverage and get the most out of the good ones, how to appreciate either. So I know you know a lot about this and you're very passionate. Let's go into the world of sponsorship. Maybe you want to start with the negative ones. Like, how do we recognize if we have a bad sponsor? We're in a bad sponsor land.
Yeah, I'm just very excited about this topic because it's at the heart of a lot of project failures are bad project sponsors. I mean, we can manage the hell out of this thing if we're a project manager, but if we don't get what we need from the project sponsor, there's a high probability we're going to run into some problems. So the other thing you got to think about is that there's two kinds of sponsors that we can talk about. There's a external sponsor that isn't inside the company that you work with. So let's call it a subcontract. You're working on a project as a sub to a prime. And then there's the internal projects, which are the bulk of what the IT people do and the support people are usually working on internal projects. So I'll talk a little bit about both of those. They're one of the things that Oliver Lehmann's been doing over in Germany is he's founded this Project Business Foundation.
Right.
And he's trying to recognize the criticality of understanding that the world isn't all about your organization, that there's a heck of a lot going on outside your organization that unfortunately the project manager has to be on top of. If not, it's going to blindside you. So that's why I've talked about the first, but let's talk about the internal projects that we do. And, you know, most of the budgets in organizations now are running somewhere around 70%, maybe 65%, focused on IT improvement projects. With the thought being, and it sounds good when you say it fast. If you invest, $2 million in developing a new software program, you'll save $10 million. Well, hell, I can sell that to anybody. That's a pretty good ratio. But then when it ends up, the project costs $12 million to save $10 million. Then you start going like, well, what the heck happened here? So that's kind of what I want to look at is how can we get some control over that? So it simplistically, it starts where you think it starts, and that is writing the system description, writing the requirements document. Okay. And so we get lazy sponsors. They're lazy sponsors, no question about it. They don't want to take the time to develop a meaningful requirements document that a project manager can build upon to make sure they deliver the project. That's just a given to me. But in my experience, I take polls all the time when I was teaching big crowds, and I'd say, what's the biggest problem you face as a project manager? Hell, I didn't really think much about it at the time, but about 85% of the people said, well, it's requirements documents. The requirements stink. And we're being asked to, and then we create this, what do we call this paper, this charter. We create this charter, and the charter is usually one page, okay? And the requirement statement, the scope of work statement is maybe 2 paragraphs if you're lucky, okay? And they give it to you and they say, okay, listen, we need this in about 6 months, and you got $400,000 to spend, okay? And you go like, well, okay, but what is that? How does that? Well, just you got 6 months and 400. Get on it. What kind of project manager are you? And so we're scared of them. We're scared of them. I mean, that charter is our bread and butter. We don't have a charter. We don't have a project, which means we don't have a job. And so we're kind of reluctant to nail them, if you will. But in my view, my suggestion to people I teach is don't accept it. Don't accept that requirements document when it's written like a piece of crap. Don't take it, because they're setting you up for failure. They're setting you up to the projects that if the project doesn't get done, they'll blame it on you. And in fact, it's really partially because their requirements weren't there. You didn't have enough information. So what you do is you go make it up. You ask other people, you try to get done. But the fact of the matter is that the requirements document should be go into charters, not just requirements documents in terms of IT efforts, but in terms of project management. The requirements document has to be there, and if not, then just don't, just tell them you're not going to do it. Now, don't say, Lisa,
we got to go into that finesse thing you talked about last week, right?
Got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
You just can't. When you're going to be held accountable for delivery, and yet you don't have definition of what it is you're going to deliver and no justification of when it is you're going to deliver, you're in trouble. You're desperately in trouble. In one of my biggest consulting jobs, when I went over to Indianapolis on this medical diagnostics thing for Roche Labs, the charter they had prepared, and they knew enough about project management. They knew the word charter.
There you go.
And so they had prepared some kind of a document that said that this is what we're going to do and this is when we're going to do it. Now, the good news was it had unlimited budget, so I could spend money, and I did, like there was no tomorrow. But when they put a tight schedule on, then you start to look at, well, what are the items in the requirements document that are movable, that are transferable, that I can make changes to and still live within the confines of the project. And that's what we want to be able to do. If you look at these projects, there's a big topic now called recovering troubled projects. We talked a little bit about it a couple of weeks ago. And it's a big topic because all the projects get in trouble because the sponsors write crappy statements of work.
Yep.
And so, the way you get, when I go in to do one of those, the first thing I say is, let's take a look at what the requirements document says and see if we can marry that with what we've actually been doing.
Yeah.
And oftentimes there's no connection. There really isn't.
Absolutely. And you highlighted something like lazy sponsors. So like a lot of time, and you also mentioned something earlier that they said, hey, if I invest $1 million, I'm going to get 5 out. And I think a lot of sponsors stop at that. Sold. Let's do it.
Oh yeah.
Where can I sign? That's it. Like, and they think that's the extent of their expertise. Like they got the money, they put the $1 million down. Obviously, like that's a big deal.
Somebody stated an ROI.
Yep. And let's.
We had that happen. We had that happen with a government agency who had their CIOs. We had CIO, CFO, COO, damn many C's. I don't know what to do with them all. So our CIO, one of my guys came to him and with a proposal for a new software system. Okay, a pretty big buy. It was going to be about $2 million by the time we got it up and running. And I told him, I said, you're never going to sell this. I mean, it was pretty tight times. He said, oh, no. I said, I'm going to sell it. He said, the ROI is exceptional. I said, really? How'd you figure that out? And he said, oh, we have ways. And so he goes into the president and pitches it, okay? And he said, it's going to cost you, there's out-of-pocket costs over the next couple of years. That's going to be about 2, 3, maybe as high as $3 million. And so a good president, he's got the next question is, well, what's going to be the return?
Sure.
What do I get for my $3 million? And he said, oh, that's the news you're going to be happy to hear. He said, this is going to return 12 million. So it's going to be a 4-to-1 return on your investment. And that president said, well, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Why not?
So he did. He sold it. When we got done in 3 years, it ended up costing $4 million, and we got a return of about $3 million. So they lost $1 million. And that's because they had no idea how to calculate that ROI because it was so loosely structured. So the guy that was the sponsor of it had no clue.
Yeah.
He knew to sell it, he had to make it look, he had to make the optics look really good.
Yeah, and this is a risky area, especially for a new project manager. You get into it, and if you want to push back, which is the right thing to do, you have to have that finesse gear that you talked about last or a couple of weeks ago, where you have to have the ability to ask the right questions and understand if we're walking into something that is their baby, and we might just have to roll with this thing, but we do have to push back in the right way. What are some of the ways, like for the mid-grade project managers, that you would recommend to push back, questions to ask, things to focus on, so that it becomes the sponsors like, oh yeah, the sponsor believes now that you're not attacking them, but you're helping them in a sense, like realize that they're being sold, like they've been sold a bill of goods in a sense.
Yeah, I think the role make the sponsors angry. I mean, they're paying the bills.
Yeah.
But I think you can ask questions that give credibility to your level of intelligence
Mm-hmm.
without insulting the sponsor.
Sure.
Like I mean, like, just look at the triple constraint. Just let's look at time, for example. If this is what we're delivering, if I understand what we're delivering, how did you come up with
Mm-hmm.
the 2 year schedule data? How did you arrive at that? Because I want to make sure I take all those things into consideration, so
Absolutely.
you can start sucking up. God, you're a great sponsor, and also help enlighten me here
Yeah.
with how you came up with these numbers, because I don't want to miss them. So I want to be sure what you took into consideration, and I can run that little scam on any sponsor,
Yeah.
by making them look really smart, while I'm actually sucking their brain in terms of how in the hell did you come up with these numbers?
Yeah.
And pretty soon they begin to thank you. Now, additionally, if you don't do that, let's say you just accept the charter document as it
Mm-hmm.
is, and then you begin to plan the project. Now you have a second shot at it,
Mm-hmm.
because now as you get into the planning of the project, and you immediately see that number ain't real.
Right.
That number, I don't know what hat he pulled that number out of, but that's not real. Now you got a shot to go back to the sponsor and say, we're running into some problems here
Mm-hmm.
on meeting this schedule. These are the things that have happened, and maybe they weren't considered in the determination of the schedule, but we've got to consider them now if we're going to continue to do that. And oh, by the way, I've looked at some workarounds. I've looked at some things that we can do to stay closer to the original schedule that you estimate. And again, what you're trying to do is build a relationship
Yes.
to where at some point in time there's some honest, candid exchange of information.
Yep.
And that's what we've got to do. Now, it all falls apart because in the business planning piece, now we kind of alluded to the IT guy, but in the business planning piece, when these guys they go away to some really nice location, sun and surf, to do the annual planning, because they think more straightly.
Yeah.
And
It
so they
always
go
helps.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're so much easier to plan. And so they get, and when they get in there, all the business leaders, they're coming there with their projects. They've already determined what they want to do. Well, there's only so much money in the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're getting into a big negotiation process to decide, where are we going to put our money for next year? What projects are we going to actually fund? Well, one of the things that these business leaders do to make their project more attractive is they skim on the money, on the budget, and they skim on the time. So all of a sudden, hey, hell, that's a high priority project. You can do it for that much. And we've tested this out. We can do it. And so all of a sudden you move to the top of the priority list for all the wrong reasons, because they lied about the numbers in the first place.
Yeah.
And then it gets worse. And so then they finally come to some agreement, okay? Like they straws or cards, I don't know. They come to some agreement, and they come back and they start handing these projects out to people, and they come back with 25 to 30% more projects than there's funding to cover.
Yes.
So that they've skimmed the money, that the budget that they've been assigned. It's not probably real, and so that it starts even above the quote sponsor. It starts at the business level, where people are trying to make justification for their projects. Then they set you up for failure if you're not careful.
It's a tough environment, because if you think about it, although we go up there, we said like, hey, well, if the sponsor was more on it or on the ball, like they could be framed up correctly, do their due diligence requirements, etc. But they're trying to get resources, they're trying to sell. They get caught in this game where everybody around them's trying to buy money, like, sell the money, and then to beat their buddies, like they got to play the game. Unfortunately, So it all rolls up to like, what kind of questions are asked at the top, the big guy or girl signing the check. So it's a tough environment. I mean, this is a
Oh
tough
yeah,
world.
it's tough because it's not based in dreams. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm working on a couple projects now that people pick the schedule. I don't know. I don't want to get in some anatomical example, but they pick the budgets and the schedules out of someplace I don't know.
Right.
And now we're coming up on those dates, and there's no way.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way. Now I should have been much more aggressive. I was just a consultant on the outside, giving advice, so I didn't
Right.
really have the role to play. But I should have, because I could see it coming. I could see it coming. And the poor project manager, I mean, he's working like crazy trying to make it happen. And I could have told him 2 months ago, it ain't happening.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
It's just not going to happen. We have an obligation. I mean, on one side, we criticize the sponsors a little bit, but on the other end, we got to make sure we have an obligation to keep those sponsors informed about reality.
True.
What's the real deal here? And unfortunately, what's happened in project management, this really irritates me all to death, is that we wait till it's too late to tell them.
Yeah.
We wait till we're 75% into the project and we know we're going to deliver 30% late, and we knew that 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But we didn't tell them till we know it's not optional. We're going to finish late. Well, you know what? One of the things I agree with in any statistical analysis is earlier is better.
Absolutely.
The earlier I know we are facing a challenge, the more time I've got to overcome it. And it's basic risk management in a way. You know these risks are coming, but you wait till they occur. And then it's too late. That's what we sell risk management on. There's a key terminology there called management, risk management, not risk observation.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to do. And the sooner you can go to senior level people or sponsors, which are not always senior level people, as soon as you can go to them with the facts and with the recommended ways of working around it, if there is any way to do it, the more credibility you get. And pretty soon they go like, well, wait a minute, Lee said we're looking at a 30% overrun here. We better pay attention to that, because we can't afford a 30% overrun. What can we do? And so I learned that with earned value. I mean, you know about earned value, but when I got involved with earned value, aggressively involved in 1973 with General Electric, the big thing that they kept beating in our heads is that you're going to use this earned value data to predict the future. To enable us to make decisions sooner rather than later. And I've sort of just been bought into that since then. I mean, earned value is just another one of those buzz. I mean, it's just things come and go. Earned value is one. But the fact of the matter is, it's the best damn thing since sliced bread, because I can predict the future. You give me a project that I have 30% of it executed, either cost or time. I can take that 30% and tell you where that project's going to end up if something doesn't happen.
Yeah, extrapolate now. And those numbers are very eye-opening a lot of times, and especially if you hit it early. Obviously, the longer the window, the bigger the cone of uncertainty, but you can get out there in the front end and say, I'm doing my best. We're cleaning it up. I'm your soldier in a sense, but like, this is where we're looking. And so a lot of times, I don't know if you agree with this, but like a lot of times I've found that a lot of times when you're in the project, you can't save the one you're currently in. You're going to do your darndest to fix it and do it, but you're using your efforts during this one to sell and create that relationship with the sponsor, where the next time, hopefully they listen to you earlier. And like, you're not going to die on the floor here, but you're going to push as hard as possible and do what they say, so that you say at the end, like, hey man, I informed you the entire time in the most positive way that we're going to miss it. We missed it. But we kept it from as bad as it could have been, but next time, hey, let's do better. And so you're managing up in an incremental way, like, very hard to do, but yes.
has a project that fails
Mhm.
or that finishes late or over budget, then I want to know the rationale for that
Yeah.
and what was done about it. But then I'm going to look for the next project. And
Yeah.
if the guy has the same damn thing happen on the next project, he's going to be over in IT or somewhere. He's not going to be running projects
Yeah.
for me
It's gonna
anymore.
be rolled out.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so I'm big. I'm big on my saying is, and I always use this saying, is that whatever happened in the past will continue to happen in the future unless someone does something about it. And the project manager is the someone.
Yeah.
You can see it coming. I mean, if I can go to a CEO or a CI, whatever, if
Yeah.
I can go to one of them at 30% into a project and tell them, based on the current process that we've executed, we're looking at $1 million overrun at the end of this project.
Yeah.
Well, you got 70% of the project left, and you just got that guy's attention.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to have the hook in there to tell
Oh
them like,
yeah,
and then on the back end of
absolutely.
that, it's not just good enough to go, hey, we're gonna miss it. They want the next question of like, how are you getting me out of this fire?
Yeah, what can we
How you
do
getting
about
me
it?
out?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I want him to say. That's what I want the sponsors to say, because
Yeah.
we're not going to fix their quality of their requirements. We're just
No.
not. I mean,
No.
I've been singing this song for so many years.
Yeah.
But once we get the conversation going, then what we want them to ask us is, what can we do to save it? What can we
Yeah.
do to recover it?
Mhm.
And I better have the answer when I ask that question.
Yeah.
But I think that's the key, is not criticizing for poor, although I would probably do that, but more likely is proving that you're a quote fireman.
Yeah.
That you can jump in and put the damn fire out and get this thing done. I think that's where we earn our stripes.
Mhm.
Nobody's going to get rich as a project manager. If you think you are, just give it up and go
Yeah, true.
teach school or something. But you're not going to get rich as a project manager. But you're going to make a good income, and you're going to make a better income the more successful your projects are. And so
True.
I think it's something we just can't. We can't overlook the value of using all the project management information that
Mhm.
exists to form the foundation for decision making.
Yeah, I agree. Now let's jump over to like the good sponsors. We talked a lot about bad sponsors, the influences, why they're making those decisions, all those things. And so disciplined sponsors, like, when you were in those positions, how do good sponsors act, differently than the bad sponsors? What kind of, are they making, more rational decisions? Are they taking longer? Are they bringing in people? Like, what are they doing differently
Yeah,
that one could
that's a
recognize?
good question. I think that the good, I've only had a few good, what I'd call good sponsors,
Yeah.
but the ones that I had were definitive in what their expectations were,
Hmm.
and accepted feedback that says, no, I need more. So,
Yep.
and they took it on as their responsibility to make sure I had what I needed to do their job. Okay.
Hmm.
And so I felt very comfortable saying, that's not enough. I
Hmm.
need more. I need to know where it came from, and then have them reply with, okay, give me a couple of days. I'll get that information for you. Instead of, look, Lee, that's why we hired you as project manager. Go get her done.
Yeah.
No, I want somebody that's going to communicate with me. Okay.
Right.
I also want someone that's involved. This is one of the things. I don't know a lot about agile and hybrid and all that, but the fact of the matter is, one of the things I really like about it is it sort of implies that the owner, if we call him the
Product owner,
owner,
yeah.
is going to be involved in the execution of the project. Oh
Hmm.
my God! I mean, that's the best news in the world. You
Hmm.
can't buy an owner to get involved in a project that's not agile. They'll go like, well, that's not mine. That's your job. Well,
Yeah.
agile says, hey, listen, we need everybody involved.
Yeah.
And I tested this out in this medical diagnostics when I took over there. We formed a separate project team, about 205 people,
Hmm.
to execute this work. And when I formed the team, I said, one of the things this team has to have is representation from every functional organization. quality. I mean, you name it. Every
Yeah.
functional organization, purchasing, contracting, everybody. They said, well, no, we'll give you that on, we'll give you that on a matrix. I said, no, you won't give me that on a matrix, or you won't give it to me. I need a dedicated group of people. And one of the people I asked for it was the executive that this was his responsibility. I said, when I have a project team meeting, I expect to see him here.
Yeah.
Not only does it do a good job of communication, it lets people know, hey, this is important.
It's a big deal. It's important. Yeah. And normally they just sign up, they show up for the statusing meeting or like, how are we doing? Red, yellow, green. What's going on? Quarterly, monthly, whatever. And if they're just sitting there looking at the piece of paper, like make it better, there's no investment other than the fact that they dropped $1 million on it. Like, and they expected the return. Like there's no, I'm in this with you guys. Like, let's figure this problem out.
Yeah, and that's what we want to do. We want to try to make that. And when I first got over there, the CEO had been brought in from DuPont. He was a DuPont turnaround specialist. So they knew they were in trouble. And I started asking around I wanted to figure out, what's this guy like? His name was Jack Van Kampen. He's 6'8", about 320 pounds, and hated people. And so I started asking around, and I couldn't believe it. More than half of the people I talked to didn't even know who the hell he was. They said, if you see Jack Van Kampen, you're probably getting fired. That was the reputation that he created for himself. Well, you can't run a project with that kind of threat, that kind of overbearing project oversight. And so that's why I stepped down one level to a VP, who later went on to be really successful in running this project. And he was there every time in fact, he was there every day. He dedicated himself to the project. I was responsible for project manager. He was responsible for the quote project. And I mean, it set a precedent like I've never seen before, and the respect that he got, because, we'd have a difficulty and schedule a late meeting, overtime meeting. Hell, he was there. He was there working right side by side. Wow. And he was fundamentally the sponsor technically, and he'd be right there. And he wouldn't leave early. He would get there early. He wouldn't leave until it was done. And I'll tell you what, I've tested this because I know these people. We implemented a project management system for them, and 205 people. Out of the 205 people, this was 1990. Out of 205 people, 150 of them still work there. And they're still using the same process.
That's crazy.
And so you can create an environment where you can get the right things done if you have the right people participating.
Sure.
But instead, what happens now with sponsors is that they don't want to get involved. They don't want to be worried about problems. They just want to know that you're going to get it done. And so, and some people say, well, that's the way I like it. I like to well, that's fine until you get a project that's so poorly defined that you're doing guesswork that ends up being more negative than it was in the beginning.
Yeah, and the hatchet falls on you at that point. Like, it's over. Like, if you don't push back. And so a lot of the things that you're talking about, like, there are those middle ground sponsors that don't have a definite position either way. Like, I'm a hands off or I'm hands in. Like, they're in the middle ground. And those guys and girls are the people that we can attack in a good way, to be like, hey, I'm inviting you to this meeting. It's really important. This is what I need you to do. Here's how I need. So you're priming the pump, bringing them in, and you're training them in, when you find those situations, it's good. Like, take advantage, like train them the way you want to. And so,
I think it's an opportunity, because if you've been given the responsibility, and let's go into fantasy land for a minute and said you've been given the accountability and the authority
there you go.
To do that, then I think that's a very key issue. We had the vice president of production, which is making these strips that you take your blood glucose measurements with. They were making them in Puerto Rico, and we had to get this project done to supply them with what they needed. I spent 2-3 days with that guy. I said, walk me through what you really need. Walk me through. And so you're getting like a subset of requirements from different functional compartments of the organization. And it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, I in retrospect, I look back and thought, if I hadn't had that conversation with that manufacturing guy, God knows where that thing would have ended up. because
Yeah.
I would have had no clue in what it was going to take to get that thing built in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. And you went there with a reason. Like there was a specific focus. You were getting this out of the guy. You have, you're very. I'm sure you were very like respectful with his time to say, "I'm here for this. I need this.
Yep.
Please give me." And boom, boom, boom. Instead of just someone that's trying to suck up to a sponsor. Like a lot of these project managers, like they're in front. They get like starry eyes. They're in front of the director, the VP, the CEO, whomever it is. Like no. Their time is valuable, extremely. Let's use it. Boom, boom, boom. And a lot of them respect that. Like, hey, he's coming, he's with a purpose, bang, bang, he hits it. And you get more as you grind along. So
Yeah, but you got to really feel that out about whether
right.
they respect it or not. I think that's a good issue that you brought up, because I think a lot of people do. A lot of senior level people basically say, well, that's what I want in a project manager. I want somebody that's going to make sure we keep this thing on track. Others, not so much. So you just have to be a little careful. I've noticed down at the gym when I used to work out, like maybe 12, 14 years ago. When I get done working out, I've noticed that some of the senior level people are down there, and I watched them. I mean, it made a point. They probably thought I was kind of a psycho. I was watching them, and what I found out was, I'll be damned, they all put their pants on the same way I did.
There you go.
There was nothing different about them. So what you have to do is make sure you invest, as a project manager, you invest the amount of time it takes to be on good rapport with those people. And some you'll be able to do some things with, and some you won't. So, and doing the wrong thing is as bad as not doing anything sometimes.
Oh, without a doubt. I think it's dead on what you just said. Like you have to understand what they are all about. Like some of them like the pageantry and the prestige and the whining and dining as far as conversation goes. Some of them like the facts and whatever. So you gotta walk in the right door. Like, or you might as well, like you said, not even walk.
I learned that a long time ago, the hard way, making a presentation to a CEO in a meeting. It was a big deal meeting. I was a little piece of a big deal meeting.
Yeah.
And I got up there and I got my slides all set. And I show my first slide, and then I go to my second slide. And he said, can we stop for a minute? I said, sure. He said, listen, is there any chance you could just cut to the chase? I didn't come here for a dog and pony show.
Yeah. You got to know who you're pitching to. Yeah.
That was a case of not doing my homework, man. I paid a price for that. You got to know to whom you're talking and what their needs are. And if you don't, you'll be sorry. I mean, but project management is fundamentally about effective communication. I mean, when you cut through all the other stuff, it's really about how effective am I as a communicator.
Yeah. And I mean, you're selling the whole entire time. I mean, I don't think of sales as a bad word. And so like you are understanding what they're receptive to. How do we communicate, and understanding how do we get our ideas across? Like how do we get them to buy into our ideas? So it's sales 101.
My son, he's 50, I don't know, he's 50 something now. He's over 50. He's a salesman extraordinaire. And one day he said to me, because he makes really, really good money, he said to me, "Why you ought to be a salesman." I said, "Oh my God, David, I could never, ever be a salesman." And he said, "Dad," he said, "stop and think about what you do every day. You're selling every single day. That's what you do." And I've thought about it, but he's so dead right. It's everything sales. I mean, everything. And project management is no different. I mean, you got to sell yourself so that you can sell what it is you want to do.
Yeah, it just goes down level by level. You got to sell the ideas. You got to sell yourself. You got to sell the project. You got to sell your progress. You got to sell like giving you enough time and resources, and you got to sell them on believing that, hey, I know what I'm talking about. It's just over and over and over. And it's not a negative thing. It's like if you're really good at what you do and you believe in it and you're taking chances, then you stand in a corner, ain't nobody going to listen to you. Like you have to get the attention, and you have to go out there and deliver. It's not good enough just to sell snake oil. You've got to deliver, like you've talked about over and over. So that's good. Now,
well, I forgot, I didn't mention, but I'll come back to you just a second. I didn't mention that I think when we're up at that high level, sorting out all the budgets and all the things that go along with that, and I think we talked about this before, but it's so important, is that when we plan how long projects are going to take, we plan those in effort hours.
True.
And we execute in what's the word that just escaped me? duration hours.
Yeah.
We estimated effort hours and executed duration hours. Well, the problem is, you see, in a matrix organization, that doesn't work.
Right.
You can't plan in effort hours because the person's not going to be 100% available.
True.
And in some cases, they're only 30% or 20% available, but yet you've estimated in 8 effort hours. So that's something that we get blindsided by. This is the other thing when I talk about projecting into the future. This one's not future oriented. This one's now oriented.
Yeah.
When you look at when you come up with your plan and you base it on duration hours, you're going to be 50% beyond the target schedule, at least, maybe more.
And that's one of those things at the beginning, you're pushing back to say, all right, so we base this on what? How do we frame up these hours? How do we frame up these schedules? Okay, great. Now I got these guys full time. Well, no. Okay, so how does that affect the, like, because too many times we talked about it before, these people are working their job and then they're assigned to work 2, 3, 4, whatever projects. And you're like, well, I get them for 15 minutes every couple of days. Like, it doesn't work for me. Like, the critical path is non-existent.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So that's good. So I think like a lot of people are like,
tell my,
yeah, go ahead. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. I'm sorry. Scarlett, go.
I used to tell my people, if you're on,
you hit mute, Lee. You hit mute, Lee. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can unmute. You hit mute. I think you accidentally hit your ear and it hit mute.
Where did I leave off?
You said you were telling your people. Sorry, a little.
Oh yeah. Okay, intrigue. So I'm telling how do I do that? I'm telling my people, if they're working on 3 or more projects, if they're distributed among 3 or 4 projects simultaneously, just stay home.
Yeah.
Because you're not gonna get anything done anyway. By the time you switch from one project to the next project, the mental capacity you have, you got to change gears. Just stay home. I said you'll come in the next day and there'll be the same amount done as if you'd stayed and worked.
There you go. I agree.
We really have to pay attention to that, because I think that more people fall into that trap because of the matrix than I think we want to recognize.
Yeah, I think that's a good conversation for later about like the dynamics of a matrix organization, like what it does to projects. And like, it feels good and it feels right. But then if you go down nuts and bolts, walk around, follow a person, then you go like, well, this is pretty crazy. Like you're going to meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. Like, when do we do the work? And so, it just gets passed down and passed down. There's a perception of progress. And then you start getting into games of statusing and games of like, oh, we're ahead and behind, and it doesn't get productive. Unfortunately.
No, I think the statusing is such a key to being able to communicate to the sponsors the real status. I think where we lose reputation with them is not telling them there's a problem until there's a problem.
Very true.
I really think that forward looking will build that relationship with a sponsor, and pretty soon you may get such a trusting relationship that you don't have to spend quite as much time holding hands. You get some authority to go along with it.
Yeah, they're gonna green light you on the thing that, hey, you've proven right. I'm just gonna go with what you say, and then maybe they'll change their ways of operating as we get into it. So closing this thing out, I think this is great. We've seen a lot of the negative sides of sponsors. We've seen some good side. How would you define like the characteristics, if we just had to clean words, little things? What are the characteristics of a great sponsor? Like, how would we close this out? What are those characteristics?
Well, characteristics simplistically is honesty and the ability to create clear and measurable output expectations. So when we look at that requirements document,
Mhm.
that charter, it needs to be more than a couple paragraphs. If you're basing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on it,
Mhm.
it needs to be clearly defined.
Mhm.
Now we're seeing a lot of movement toward business analysts
Mhm.
writing business cases and writing those charter document
Yep.
statements. That's fine if the sponsor evaluates them and understands them. And then the next one is frequency of communication.
Mm.
This can't be done in a vacuum. We
Right.
need the sponsors to at least be visible, more hopefully involved
Yes.
in the project. And finally, we want to make sure that the sponsor is willing to accept change.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big issue with sponsors. It's like once they define it, by golly, that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I think sponsors need to be open to the possibility that it ain't going to be like they thought it was going to be.
Right.
And so we need to. Those are kind of four
I
that
love those. Yeah.
I really focus on, and I think that we should have project management courses for sponsors.
I agree 100%. Like when we
Yeah.
go into big companies, like that's one of the areas where we're saying like, because sponsors and a lot of times say, well, these are our list of projects. These are hopes or dreams, our wants. This is the business case that we've been sold and we tacitly agree on, and then go do it. So here's my list. It's prioritized. Bring me my money. But
Yeah.
like they need to ask better questions. They need to analyze things. If they got the analysts going out there, they need to be able to put that like strong light on it to uncover the bullshit and like see like what
No, that's
exactly
right.
is happening. And I like those things. I think like honest ability to create clear and measurable like requirements and in states, frequency of communication, and willing to accept change. Those are dead on. Kind of like if the project manager should probably live those principles as well. Like they sound pretty good. Like him or her dealing with the team. Those
Sure.
four do well. So I love
Well,
it.
and no, not too many years ago, we added procurement as one of the, well, it was quite a few years ago now, procurement as one of the body of knowledge areas.
Mhm.
And to put this in perspective, when you get a charter from a sponsor,
Mhm.
that's the equivalent of a contractual document from an outside company. So in
Absolutely.
other words, you should consider that your contract.
And we
think
would
about it
never
to
take a
yourself.
contract right off the bat,
Yeah.
sign it and go off. That would never happen.
Would you be willing to sign off on a contract with the kind of requirements definition,
No
the
way.
ambiguity of the dates, and the costs are who knows? And
Mhm.
they're asking you to sign a contract. That's one of the other things that earn value. Those earned value packages were essentially contracts between two people on the project. Well, so you look at the outside. Though, if you're going outside to build something and you don't have the wherewithal, so you got to subcontract it, that's a major document. That contract document's going to take some time because that's what we're all going to be measured on.
Yes.
And so the ability, I mean, I don't think it'd be a bad idea if we created these charters like contracts and put incentive clauses in them, so that if somebody knocked out a project ahead of schedule, what? Oh, you get a letter from who cares about a letter? Give me some incentive, give me some cash, give me something to recognize that we performed above and beyond expectations. I mean, when we did that project in Indiana, it was a 3-year project. We got it done in 18 months. He sent everybody on the team, 205 people and their significant other, to Hawaii for 2 weeks on him.
That's crazy.
So, that's a recognition of performance.
Mhm.
Instead of writing a letter that, gee, thanks, we're glad you worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 18 months. And we really appreciate it. Here's your letter.
Yeah, agreed. And I love that thing that if you just started off, and I think this is a great way to play it with the sponsor. Hey, I consider this as like a contract.
Absolutely.
Just like I signed a deal with the outside. I want to put as much due diligence and fervor into this that I would with the sub. And so like sponsor, I need a little bit more. Help me execute like we're getting paid to do it, which
let me take it one step further because I think you're right. That's a good process. but I would add one thing.
All right.
Imagine this is your money.
Yeah, that's a good way to start everything. Yeah.
Then, then think to yourself, when I sign off on this thing, make believe it's your money. It's your responsibility, your money. It's going to impact you personally. All of a sudden, you'll take a lot higher interest in that.
Oh, that's very true. I mean, as a guy that signs checks for guys to do work and girls to do work, it gets a lot,
Yeah,
like the hands get a lot sweatier when you say, all right, we're doing this, we're going deep. And like, I love what you said earlier with you're setting, as a sponsor, setting up the expectation to say, this is the depth that I want it, but I want you, the project manager, I want you to tell me, am I screwing myself? Am I in trouble? Am I setting you up for failure? Tell me now. It's my money. Like, I don't want to give it away. Like, yeah. So
that's that relationship part. If you get that relationship developed where you can go in and have candid conversations, because you're not doing it for you or for them, you're doing it for the organization, have candid conversations. It goes a long ways to success.
Yeah, you become a good steward for the company in a sense, to use a general term. Like you're saying, this money's important. I don't want to waste it. I want to kill it. I want to do great jobs. Like, what can I do can you help me get a better understanding so that I can execute on this thing? I think that's great. I think that people are a little bit better set up to how to have the conversations. The biggest thing is, like you said, how to have the conversations, how to understand you're being set up in a bad spot, and how to work it so that you can try to steer the ship in a different direction. So
the other thing, one other thing before we close out,
no problem.
I think it's important to identify. I don't know if you're going to develop it in a charter or not, but I think you got to have a basis for comparative analysis. So if you're going to try to cause change to take place, then you need to have I'm going to use the term ROI. You're going to have an ROI projected based on the original charter. Okay. And then as you execute the project and things start to change, you need to be able to relate that back to the impact on the ROI. That's like that software guy said, I'll do it for $3 million, you get a $12 million benefit, except not really. So as soon as that started changing, as soon as that benefit went down from 12 million to 10 million, I ought to be having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Right off the bat. I mean, that clear understanding at the beginning that we're going to attract the entire time, and the sponsor should hold on to that thing and hold everybody's accountability. It leads back into how do we set expectations off the charter? How do we set bonuses? How do we set all those things? If it's important, then let's put all the eyes toward it. So everybody's got a game to play in it. So that's awesome.
Agree.
Well, Lee, I really appreciate it. Next week, we'll go deeper into another topic, but thanks again. And this was awesome. Thank you, sir.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Scott. Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon. Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Take care.